In this video, we're going to be discussing the sacrococcygeal joint and other relevant structures. Down here in green, you can actually see the sacrococcygeal joint, and as the name suggests, it's an articulation between the inferior surface of S5, so the bottom of the sacrum, and the superior surface of the first coccygeal segment CO1, or really just the coccyx in general. The sacrococcygeal joint is not a diarthrosis. In other words, it's not a synovial joint. Structurally, it's actually a symphysis, and functionally, it's an amphiarthrosis. Recall that amphiarthroses are joints that are not freely movable, but they do allow some slight movement. Other examples of amphiarthroses would be the pubic symphysis and also the intervertebral joints between the various vertebral bodies of the spine. Now right here in green, you can't see it too well, but there is a disc between S5 and the first coccygeal segment right there, and it's called the sacrococcygeal disc, also called the interosseous ligament. If we compare the sacrococcygeal discs to the other discs of the cervical, thoracic, and lumbar spines, it's thinner overall, it's still made of fibrocartilage, and it's thicker anteriorly and laterally than it is posteriorly and medially, and it's also firmer than the other discs of the spine above the sacrum. Right here we see the anterior sacrococcygeal ligament. This is a ligament that connects the anterior surface of the sacrum to the anterior surface of the coccyx. And it's actually just an inferior extension of the anterior longitudinal ligament, or the ALL. And then right here we have the posterior sacrococcygeal ligament. It has two parts, a deep part and a superficial part. Obviously we can see the superficial part much better here. And it's a connection between the median sacral crest and free margin of the sacral hiatus, so up here, down to the dorsal or posterior surface of the coccyx. And it's an inferior extension of the ligamenta flava of the spine. And it also closes the posterior aspect of the distal end of the vertebral canal. The deep part of the posterior sacrococcygeal ligament connects the posterior fifth sacral body within the sacral canal, so kind of underneath the superficial part right here. You can't see it, so basically the body of S5, to the posterior coccyx via the superficial dorsal ligament. That's another term for the superficial part of the posterior sacrococcygeal ligament. So in other words, the deep and superficial fibers actually blend as they go inferiorly down to the coccyx. And the deep part here is a flat band-like extension coming down from the posterior longitudinal ligament, or the PLL. Then over here on the sides, we have the lateral sacrococcygeal ligaments. We can just see the right one right here, but there'd also be a left one over here on this side. And these ligaments connect the lower lateral sacral angles, so right here, down to the transverse processes of the first coccygeal segment, CO1, which you can see right here. So this is the right one, and this over here would be the left transverse process of the first coccygeal segment. And then in pink right here, we have the intercornual or interarticular sacrococcygeal ligaments. These are the deepest of all of them. You can see the left one right here, the right one over here, and these connect the sacral cornu to the coccygeal cornu. So cornu is another term for horns. So coming down from the sacrum right here, there's actually a couple spikes or horns projecting inferiorly, and then you can better see the coccygeal cornu here. They're actually projecting superiorly. And so each of these intercornual sacrococcygeal ligaments connects the corresponding horns or cornu on either side. Now earlier on in this video I mentioned that the sacrococcygeal joint anatomically is a symphysis, and so functionally it's an amphiarthrosis, meaning it only allows slight movement. And that slight movement for the coccyx can only occur in the sagittal plane. And that's specifically flexion and extension of the coccyx relative to the sacrum. In general, the vast majority of these movements are passive movements that occur during defecation, child labor, things like that. And when sacral movements increase the anteroposterior diameter of the pelvic outlet, then sacrococcygeal movement occurs as well to further increase that diameter. So if you look here at this picture on the right, you're looking at the anterior surface of the sacrum and the anterior surface of the coccyx. And overall, these structures curve anteriorly. And so if you think about taking the coccyx and bending it backwards, so moving it posteriorly, well, that would be sacrococcygeal extension. And that's going to occur during things like defecation, child labor. In either of those cases, you're having to move something out of the body, right? And that thing that you're moving out of the body, whether it's feces or a child, is anterior to the sacrum and the coccyx. So if you're trying to move something down through here, you need more space for it, so it makes sense to get the coccyx out of the way, move it posteriorly. So sacral coccygeal extension. Again, most of that is going to be passive movement. And then when those events are over and there's no longer a need for this extra space anteriorly, well, then the coccyx can return to its normal resting position. And that movement of it back anteriorly would be sacrococcygeal flexion. Most of sacrococcygeal flexion is going to be passive, just like it is for extension. However, we'll see in a few minutes that there's a little bit of active sacrococcygeal flexion that's promoted by the coccygeus muscle. Now, if we look at the posterior view, we see the sacral hiatus right here. And recall that there are two nerve roots that exit inferiorly through that sacral hiatus. Those are the S5 nerve root, which is a little more lateral, and the medial ones are the coccygeal nerve roots. This network of these nerve roots right here forms what we call the coccygeal plexus. The S5 nerve root exits inferiorly through that sacral hiatus and actually passes through a canal that's created by this overlying intercornual ligament. So the S5 nerve root goes through that canal, deep to the intercornual ligament and out. The coccygeal nerve root does not pass through that same canal. It does not go deep to the intercornual ligament. It actually goes underneath the cornu right here and posterior to the first coccygeal level. But you'll notice that the S5 nerve root and the coccygeal nerve root are going to merge together with some contributions from the S4 nerve root, although they're not shown here, and they form what's called the anococcygeal nerve. So the anococcygeal nerve is a sensory nerve innervating the skin over the coccyx and the sacrococcygeal joint. And part of it pierces the sacrotuberous ligament to gain access to the skin over the coccyx as it moves superficially. So overall, the S5 and coccygeal nerve roots provide sensory and motor innervation. Sensory innervation to their respective dermatomes, and then motor innervation to the coccygeus muscle, really just S4 and S5 contribution, none from the coccygeal nerve root. And then also they provide partial innervation to several pelvic organs. Those include the uterus and fallopian tubes in women, the bladder in both men and women, and the prostate in men. Right here in green you see the coccygeus muscle, also called the ischio-coccygeus muscle. It originates partially off of the ischial spine, which you can see in the picture, and then also off of the sacrospinous ligament, which you can't see in this image. As the fibers run medially here, they insert on the inferior end of the sacrum and then also onto the coccyx, which you can't really see too well right here. Thus, the name of the muscle. Coccygeus is innervated by anterior rami from S4 and S5, but not the coccygeal nerve. And its blood supply is via the inferior vesicular artery, the inferior gluteal and pudendal arteries. And the actions of coccygeus are, first of all, as a pelvic floor muscle. So this muscle works in conjunction with the levator ani muscle group, which you can see right here, to support the pelvic viscera. But know that coccygeus is not a part of levator ani. Levator ani collectively is the puborectalis, pubococcygeus, and iliococcygeus. It doesn't actually include this muscle. The coccygeus can also help with coccygeal flexion after defecation, so supporting the pelvic floor, but also procontinence. When the pelvic floor, including the coccygeus, becomes weak, then that's when you tend to have loss of bowel and bladder function and accidents. And then also the coccygeus helps with coccygeal flexion after defecation. So remember that during defecation you get coccygeal extension, moving that coccyx out of the way so there's more space to move the feces out of the body. Well, after that's over, the coccyx can resume its original position, and that's aided in part by coccygeal flexion. Most of the movement is passive, but there is a little bit of active movement that's provided by the coccygeus. And it can also weakly aid the puborectalis muscle, one of the levator ani muscles, to control urination and defecation, especially when there's an increase in intra-abdominal pressure. And then hopefully what you can see here on the dermatomal patterns is that on the anterior surface of the body, there is no area of skin that is innervated by the S5 or coccygeal nerve root levels. But if we look on the posterior surface of the body, the S5 nerve root level provides sensory innervation for this little area of skin right around the anus. It's very hard to see, but it is there right where my mouse is. Then if we look at the right side of the picture here, on the anterior surface of the coccyx, there's a nerve bundle called the ganglion impar. And this consists of descending sympathetic nerves, so they give their contributions to the ganglion impar. And there's also contributions from the S4 nerve root, not shown, the S5 nerve root right here, and the coccygeal nerve root. And it turns out that nociceptive sensory input, so that's stimuli that potentially cause pain, particularly from the S5 and coccygeal dermatomes, is transmitted back to the central nervous system through neurons whose cell bodies reside within the ganglion impars. And so potentially, pharmacological blockade of the ganglion impars can treat pain originating from the rectum, anus, perineum, distal urethra, vagina, vulva, scrotum, and coccyx. And examples of conditions that provide that nociceptive sensory input and therefore pain would be vulvodynia, coccygodynia, and pain from anything such as perineal rectal anal malignancy, endometriosis, interstitial cystitis, and chronic prostatitis. So hopefully this video gave you some good information about the sacrococcygeal joint and other structures around the joint, such as the... Thanks for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, and check out my Instagram for cool science and not science stuff.